In this episode, we are getting grounded in what the CompTIA Cybersecurity Analyst, CySA Plus, certification is really about, who it serves best, and why it has become such a meaningful milestone for people trying to move into real-world security work. A lot of learners hear the name, see that it is respected, and assume it must be only for highly experienced practitioners who already live inside a Security Operations Center, SOC. But that is not the full picture. CySA Plus sits in an interesting place because it is practical, defensive, and focused on the habits of mind that security analysts need when they are trying to detect suspicious activity, investigate it, and make reasonable decisions under pressure. For a new learner, that makes this certification important not just because it can appear on a resume, but because it introduces a way of thinking that helps you understand how cybersecurity work actually happens in many organizations. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. One of the best ways to understand who CySA Plus is for is to stop thinking about job titles as fixed boxes and start thinking about responsibilities. Many people preparing for this certification are trying to become security analysts, threat analysts, junior incident responders, vulnerability management team members, or people who support defensive operations in cloud and on-premises environments. Some are already working in general information technology, IT, roles such as help desk, system administration, network support, or desktop support, and they want to move closer to security without making an impossible jump into a highly specialized engineering role on day one. Others are already in security-adjacent positions and want a structured way to fill in knowledge gaps around alert triage, log review, incident handling, and basic threat analysis. That broad usefulness is part of the reason the certification matters, because it does not assume that everyone is starting from the same place. Yet it still points them toward a recognizable defensive security skill set. What makes the certification distinctive is that it is centered less on memorizing isolated technical facts and more on learning how to interpret evidence in context. A defensive analyst rarely succeeds by knowing one tool deeply while ignoring everything else around it. Instead, that analyst has to understand what normal looks like, notice what seems unusual, connect different data points, and decide whether an event is harmless noise or something that deserves attention. CySA Plus reflects that reality by leaning into analysis rather than simple recall. For beginners, this is useful because it helps build a habit that matters across the whole security field, which is the ability to see technology, users, systems, and business operations as connected parts of one larger environment rather than as unrelated technical topics. It also helps to understand what CySA Plus is not. It is not a pure hacking certification, even though knowing how attackers think is valuable to defensive teams. It is not a management certification focused mainly on policy, budgeting, or executive governance, even though communication and risk awareness absolutely matter in analyst work. It is not an advanced digital forensics credential that expects deep specialization in evidence preservation or expert witness practices. Instead, it sits in the practical middle, where learners need enough technical understanding to recognize suspicious behavior, enough security knowledge to understand why it matters, and enough judgment to communicate clearly about what they are seeing. That middle ground makes the certification accessible to serious beginners while still being meaningful to employers who need people that can contribute to actual monitoring, investigation, and response functions. Another reason this certification matters is that modern organizations generate an enormous amount of data, and someone has to make sense of it. Security teams see logs, alerts, vulnerability findings, user behavior anomalies, network events, endpoint activity, and cloud service notifications all competing for attention at the same time. Very little value comes from simply collecting more data if no one can interpret it well enough to support a timely decision. CySA Plus matters because it teaches the mindset behind turning raw technical signals into something useful. That is a big shift for many beginners, because early technical education often focuses on how systems are built or how tools are configured, while analyst work often begins after something has already happened and someone must now determine whether that event deserves concern, escalation, or containment. For many learners, one of the most encouraging things about CySA Plus is that it rewards curiosity and disciplined thinking more than flashy technical theatrics. The popular image of cybersecurity sometimes suggests that the field belongs only to elite specialists who can improvise code at high speed, reverse engineer malware from memory, or instantly explain every network protocol in exhausting detail. In reality, many successful defenders spend their time reading carefully, comparing evidence, asking good questions, spotting patterns, documenting what they find, and escalating issues responsibly. Those are learnable skills. This is why the certification is a good fit for people who are patient, observant, and willing to practice analytical habits, even if they do not yet see themselves as deeply technical experts. It gives structure to the idea that good cybersecurity work often comes from thoughtful attention rather than dramatic individual heroics. The people who benefit most from pursuing CySA Plus often share a few traits, even if their backgrounds are very different. They tend to want a security career that is grounded in real operational work rather than pure theory. They are interested in how incidents are discovered, how evidence is reviewed, how vulnerabilities are prioritized, and how defensive teams make practical decisions in messy situations where the answer is not obvious. They also tend to be comfortable with the fact that cybersecurity involves continuous learning, because threats evolve, tools change, and organizations adopt new technologies that alter the defensive picture. A learner coming from networking might appreciate the traffic and infrastructure side more quickly, while a learner coming from systems support might connect more naturally with operating system behavior and endpoint issues. But both can grow into the analyst mindset that this certification is designed to support. It is also important to talk honestly about why employers care about this kind of credential. Good hiring managers do not assume that a certification automatically proves mastery, but they do see it as evidence that a candidate has invested effort into understanding a defined body of knowledge and can work within a shared language of security operations. When a resume shows CySA+, it suggests that the candidate has at least studied topics such as threat detection, vulnerability management, security monitoring, incident response, and basic analysis across different parts of the environment. That matters because organizations need defenders who can contribute within teams, not just individuals who know one narrow tool or one isolated concept. The certification can help reduce uncertainty for employers by showing that the candidate has engaged with the foundations of analyst work in a structured way, which is especially useful for people who are still building their first serious security role. There is also a professional identity element here that should not be overlooked. Many beginners entering cybersecurity feel overwhelmed because the field appears vast, fragmented, and full of competing advice. One person tells them to become a cloud specialist immediately, another says to focus on red team skills, another pushes compliance, and another insists that automation is everything. CySA Plus matters because it offers a more grounded starting point around defensive operations and analysis, which are central to how many organizations actually protect themselves day to day. Even if a learner later moves into engineering, architecture, leadership, threat hunting, or digital forensics, the ability to think like an analyst remains useful. Understanding how security events are identified, validated, investigated, and communicated gives you a durable professional foundation that supports many paths rather than trapping you inside one narrow lane. Another reason this certification deserves attention is that it helps bridge the gap between technical signals and business impact. A beginner may first think of cybersecurity as purely technical, almost like a puzzle of packets, processes, and system events. But organizations do not protect technology for its own sake. They protect operations, revenue, reputation, customer trust, legal obligations, and the ability of the business to keep functioning. Analyst work becomes much more meaningful when you understand that an alert is not just an alert, but potentially a sign that business services, sensitive data, or critical workflows could be affected. CySA Plus encourages that wider perspective by asking learners to interpret information, assess significance, and support appropriate action. That matters because the strongest defenders are not just technically aware, they are also able to connect technical evidence to organizational consequences in a calm and reasoned way. Beginners should also know that pursuing CySA Plus can be a confidence-building process when approached correctly. Many people assume they need to feel fully ready before beginning, but readiness often grows during preparation rather than before it. As learners work through foundational ideas about logs, alerts, systems, threats, vulnerabilities, and response actions, they begin to see patterns that once felt confusing. Terms that seemed abstract start to connect to one another. The security world becomes less like a collection of random concepts and more like an operating environment with recognizable behaviors and goals. That growing sense of coherence is valuable in its own right. Even before passing an exam, a learner who studies for CySA Plus seriously often starts reading headlines differently, asking better questions in technical conversations, and understanding how defensive teams interpret the things they observe. There is a common misconception that defensive certifications are somehow less exciting or less prestigious than offensive ones, but that view misses how much responsibility sits on the defensive side of the house. Organizations do not just need people who can explain how an attack might happen. They urgently need people who can identify suspicious patterns, reduce uncertainty, prioritize action, and support recovery when something goes wrong. CySA Plus speaks directly to that need. It respects the reality that most organizations win not by performing occasional dramatic technical feats, but by sustaining disciplined monitoring, sensible investigation, and coordinated response over time. For a beginner, that is good news because it means the path into meaningful cybersecurity work does not require becoming a cinematic hacker stereotype. It requires becoming reliable, observant, informed, and capable of making sound judgments when details are incomplete. As you continue through a course built around this certification, the deeper value of CySA Plus becomes clearer. It is not only about passing an exam or collecting another line on a resume, though both of those can matter in practical career terms. It is about learning a professional way to think through ambiguity, to examine evidence without panic, to recognize when something is normal and when it deserves concern, and to communicate that difference to others in a useful way. Those habits matter whether you end up in a formal SOC, on a small internal security team, in a consulting role, or in an IT position with growing security responsibility. The title of the certification may sound like it belongs to one job, but the underlying mindset supports far more than one title, and that is one reason it continues to matter in a field where roles often overlap. By the end of this opening conversation, the most important point to carry forward is that CySA Plus is for people who want to build practical defensive understanding and who are ready to learn how analysts observe, interpret, and respond inside modern technology environments. It matters because it helps beginners move from general interest to professional direction, from scattered terminology to connected understanding, and from curiosity about cybersecurity to a clearer sense of where they might fit. It also matters because organizations need more people who can think carefully, act responsibly, and understand that security is not just about tools, but about evidence, context, and consequences. If you are new to the field and trying to find a serious starting point that is grounded in how defense works in the real world, CySA Plus is a strong place to begin because it teaches not only what to notice, but why noticing it well can make a real difference.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.